can.
All right. Okay, wonderful. Again, really excited to be talking to you guys today. What I'm going to be sharing with you are the steps to configure the financials module so that you can take advantage of this for your forecasting budgeting process, and how you can get up and running very quickly. I'm also going to touch base on how you set up strategic modeling, just super quick example or super quick steps to further elaborate on the session that Shankar presented on earlier today. So with that, we're going to jump in. I only have 45 minutes, and I usually have lots of content to share with you, as always. So first, very quickly, for anyone who may be new, again, what we're going to be talking about is the Oracle Planning Cloud that comes with your EPM Cloud subscription. Centralized forecasting planning tool that is supported both in the web and in Excel. So if you have users who like to model and plan and work in Excel, that is supported with the cloud. And we've got some really powerful capabilities for our scenario modeling, our forecasting, and then reporting and analytics. Underneath the covers is an S-based engine, which provides a number of different benefits related to fast slicing and dicing and reporting of data, fast calculations. When we talk about payer data, you guys have a lot. We have one healthcare payer client that we're working on right now, and I think 1 month, had 7 million rows of transactions that we needed to get into these EPM solutions. So it's important that you guys have these scalable solutions to handle the volumes of data that you guys have coming through, because you have quite a bit. And again, you've got a lot of different calculations that you're doing. And some of those I'll touch on today, just some examples of how you can incorporate some of those calculations into the planning cloud. Again, you may be leveraging, if you heard the session prior to mine that Jerry presented on related to profitability and cost management to support all of the allocations you guys are doing down to a very granular line of business plan membership level. So this is one of those tools in your tool belt to support the process. So today and in this specific session, I'm going to talk about the financials module. Now, what this module is, it's essentially a pre-built framework that you can take advantage to get up and running very quickly. And again, you've heard us talk a lot about coronavirus and scenario planning. And, if you're not doing something today, what can I do to get up and running very quickly? And using the financials model as kind of that template is one way to do that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's basically pre-built content, so user interfaces like data forms to capture forecasts and inputs from users, pre-built calculations and kind of a layout for calculations, reporting and analysis, all built within an application. So you can basically turn on the financials module. You will go through an enable and configure process, and I'm going to walk you through those steps today so that you can take advantage of it. So before I show that, I'm going to kind of show just an example, kind of high-level example of like once you have this configured, what this looks like. So this is our IR Health, NRL Health. We've gotten into my made-up company of payers that we've gotten to the business. And when users log into Planning Cloud and Financials Cloud, they're going to see a series of cards and clusters. This is meant to look like your smartphone, where you can navigate to your different applications. That's what happens here. So we can navigate to focused interfaces and reports for healthcare spend, plan administration, projects, operations administration. Again, users are going to only see what they have access to in that process. Once they click on a card, they're ready to start doing their forecasting process. The Financials Cloud and Financials module helps support a number of different ways to forecast. So we can do driver-based planning, we can do trend-based planning, and we can also just do direct inputs and capture direct inputs from our users. So here you see some screens, and this is the Financials module, and what we've done is we've built in the specific drivers that are applicable for the NRL Health payer company. So we've got things like our rates and number of contracts, number of members, whether that's by prescriptions, dental, hearing, or different types of plans. What are the different drivers associated to then calculate our healthcare costs, our plan administration costs, and so forth. So again, we've got these pre-built forms and features that we can take advantage of, and what we do as part of the steps, and we'll see this, is we kind of layer in the specific drivers and logic that is applicable to you. Again, trend-based, it comes with some out-of-the-box trends that we can take advantage of. So if we want to use current year actual average to do a trend-based planning, we can. That's kind of tricky right now because some of the trends may not actually make sense with the coronavirus that's going on. We can use prior year actual average. You can at least use different trends, and then you can apply percent increase or decreases, or you can just layer in direct adjustments on top of that. And then notice how you can really trace through if you look at the form that I have illustrated on the left, you can see the visibility of the calculated value based on the particular trend and then how you've layered in those adjustments. So you can see the total end results, calculated result for this particular account. And again, across the top in our forms, this is where, again, you're going to kind of build in and you can plan by an entity, by a product, you know, whatever granularity that you want to build within your system, it supports that. We can see these forms across a number of different scenarios. So I may have forecast working, I may have forecast best case, forecast worst case. I may have, if we use Edwards' versions and scenarios that he talked about earlier today, we may have, you know, this is our forecast in our prolonged contraction version, or this is my forecast in a delayed recovery. So you can very quickly change your point of view and see the updated results, and again, very quickly to kind of toggle back and forth. And again, the forms can be focused in, so here we're looking at our healthcare costs. We may have plan administration costs, we may have our operating costs. We can kind of create these dynamic forms that users can navigate and work with. Now, the other thing we mentioned, so driver-based to supported, trend-based, we also have direct input forms. So if there are things that we just want to key in, again, this is kind of the flexibility that we need right now in the COVID scenario, is there's some unknowns and where we can't really potentially use drivers, we can't use trends, we just know we need to make changes, increases or decreases based on the craziness that is taking place right now with this virus. So here's another example, like kind of looking at the driver-based plan administration costs. So, you know, we've got our total members, and then we've got our PMPM costs. And again, throughout, you've got visibility into the formulas and the logic that's taking place behind the scenes, so users kind of understand how their plans are being calculated. So again, same kind of trend and direct input, things that are trend and direct input forms that are supported. You can also, in financials, do driver-based operational costs. So an example that we're looking at here is if we're not going to do granular workforce planning, that may be kind of part of our annual process, but when we're scenario modeling, we may want to do this at a more aggregate level. So we just want to take maybe our head count, our average salaries, and then the other components of our workforce compensation expense, and do kind of more of a driver-based calculation there. So we can do that, and then we can make some high-level adjustments. So if we know we're going to need to reduce potentially headcount, or we're going to have to reduce salaries, you could do those here in this percent increase, decrease, and have those results calculated for you and flow through. So again, a lot of this is just pre-built within the financials model. It's just you kind of turning on the features and functions, and then potentially layering in your specific formula so that you can calculate your forecast. Same thing from an operational standpoint. Again, we can take advantage of the trend-based forecasting and direct input if we wanted to use that as well. At any point, you have the ability to plan by a number of different custom dimensions that you identify in the application. You can also plan by project. You can enable project in the financials module, and/or you can plan by project if we turn on. There's actually a specific projects module that's available as well. So just know that project level planning is supported as well in this cloud process. Users are only going to see what they have access to. So the cost centers, the accounts, the departments, we can assign granular security so that, you know, folks only see the data that we have access to. What's great about the EPM Cloud is that as users update their plans and their forecasts, you know, those results are calculated. We immediately can, at any different level, see, you know, at a total plan level, at a total project level, kind of all of those costs and all of our net income related balance sheet cash flow activities. We can see all of that kind of aggregated together. And again, we can use the point of views to drill down and see different levels of information. So you can see here we've got our healthcare, our premiums, premiums, plan administration expense, all the way up to our total expense. And then again, we can see kind of the breakdown if we wanted to see that by Medicare, non-Medicare, if we want to see that, you know, across our different payer types, whether they're self-insured, fully insured. We can see breakdowns by our medical expenses, our dental expenses, vision, hearing. So again, whatever different elements that you guys have, we kind of can build those in, and we can build different views of the data so you can very quickly slice and dice the aggregated forecast and models that you have for your financials. Now, again, some of the screens that I showed you guys were all web-based, but I did mention at the very beginning, Excel is supported too. So users, if they want to plan in Excel, enter information in Excel, all those same UIs that we saw are also available in Excel. We can also provide instructions for users so that they can understand the steps. We want to make these tools as simple. I think many of you, probably every person on this call has a smartphone, and I'm pretty sure none of you attended, you know, a one-day training class on how to use the iPhone, although maybe that might be helpful for me. But it's intuitive, you can figure it out, and that's what's great about the EPM Cloud is there are tools that we can set up for users so that really it doesn't require a heavy amount of training for them to be able to plan their information and be able to report all of the different information. The other thing that you can do with financials is you can layer in any specific requirements that you have, and you're not limited. So that's what's great. It's really a framework, a template that you can take advantage of what you want, but then you can layer in your own elements. So one example is that, you know, a lot of times, you know, you have your actuals information at your very granular levels of detail, but from a forecast standpoint, you may not have that. So you may be forecasting at maybe a total plan level, and then what you want to do is then take that total plan and then split it out across your different plans by a split percentage. And so what we could do is we can actually load in all those different actual statistics. So it may be our claims, members, contracts, loading in those counts so that we can then calculate the split percentages across all the different plans. We can then apply that to our forecast, and then we've got a fully allocated system. Now, again, we can do this in Planning Cloud, depending on the complexity of what you want the split percentage and the allocations to work. PCM, profitability and cost management, may make sense. But again, all part of the same EPM solution. So just know you've got, you know, a couple of different places where you could do it, and it just depends. So you can calculate the split percentages. You can calculate them, again, using that same trend functionality. So we can do our Medicare, non-Medicare splits. We can base that on our current year actual average, prior year actual average. We can then layer in a % increase or decrease assumption. That's going to calculate what the membership count is, and then we can make adjustments from there. So then based on those split percentages, based on those calculated statistics, it's then going to calculate the split percentages. You could even, if you wanted to, then further layer in adjustments based on the split percentage calculations. So really powerful solution to know that, you know, you can kind of pull this together and, again, maybe have a more simplified forecasting process, but then leverage kind of the detail that you have on the actual side to help do the allocation on the forecast and budget side. Again, these assumptions can vary by scenario, version, year. You can go through and from, you know, an account perspective, you have your different types of costs. So what is the driver, the split methodology that you want to use? So do you want to use members? Do you want to use claims? So you can actually, we can set up user interfaces where we can capture in those assumptions and then, you know, split out the forecast based on those assumptions. So hopefully this is making sense. I know I'm kind of going through quickly because I've only got 45 minutes. At that point, we've got our, you know, calculated split percentages based on actuals, based on our assumptions. We can then apply that to our forecast, which would then split out our forecast so we can see that across our plans. So here you see kind of the calculated results based on those split percentages, Medicare, non-Medicare, and across the different plans or lines of business, depending on, you know, kind of what view of the data that you're wanting to take. Flexible calculations, again, you know, within the modules that we can take advantage of. And then, of course, what's great within the APM Cloud is we've got built-in dashboards and visualizations. So again, some of the text on this is a little bit teeny tiny, but you can, if you wanted to see kind of your Medicare, non-Medicare split, if you wanted to see some visualizations across your different types of expenses and breakouts, there are pre-built dashboards that are delivered with the financials modules, and then we can create our own dashboards if we want to as well. We can also create our nicely formatted reports. So I've seen, for some of you guys, you have some really teeny tiny reports with a lot of information in them. We can totally do that. And what's great about the modules is, again, as soon as the data, users enter in the data, we set up the calculations, things are automatically calculated. You can immediately run reports. And it's a click the button experience to just pull up a report. It's going to pull that live data, no additional steps required. You have a couple of different options available to you: PDF format, HTML format. You can create point of views to make these reports very dynamic. So here you can see kind of breakdowns of looking at your total healthcare costs, and then a split, Medicare versus non-Medicare across your different plans. And then of course with narrative reporting, which is another business process available within the APM Cloud subscription, is you can really create these pretty slick report packages, combining reports and data from APM Cloud, but also from a number of different sources, adding narrative into the explanations of the different financials that are coming through. And of course, you have different ad hoc capabilities in Smart View. So this is your users can connect directly into those databases, and it's a double-click experience. So hopefully that gave you, a quick preview into what financials looks like and how you can tailor financials, for your Payor solution. So now let's go through the steps for enabling and configuring. So this is roughly the high-level checklist. You're going to create an application. You're going to enable the financials module. Once you've enabled and kind of set the configuration options, we then set the planning and forecast preparation, which is basically setting what are the current periods and how are we going to plan. We then, if you have, which you likely will, custom accounts, right? So we know from a Payor standpoint, we're going to have, some drivers like members. We'll have membership costs or PMPMs. We're going to have our own specific revenue accounts or expense accounts that we want to kind of layer in and bring into the fold within the financials module, which is totally supported. We'll then be importing in, our entity dimension, likely, some type of geographical dimension, line of business, department, cost center. So we're going to have a lot of other custom dimensions. We're going to import those dimensions into the application. And then at that point, we set some variables. We need to set some assumptions and some trends. We're going to be loading in our actual data. We run a pre-built rule that's delivered, either the prepare forecast and or the prepare plan business rule. And then kind of the application's ready to go. We need to assign security and provision users so that they can get in. But then that's it. So this is kind of your high level step, and I'm gonna kind of take you through each one of those components. So once you create an application, this is where you'll create the application, and then you're going to go to the screen where you can enable the financials framework. We're able to incrementally enable features as you need them. Which is great. So you'll go through the process once you've enabled the features. This is where you can check, do we want to plan revenue and gross margin? Do we want to plan expense? We can choose to use the pre-built accounts. And so again, if we're going to be planning driver-based revenue based on a product, we would check those boxes. And then the same thing from an expense standpoint. So we can choose the pre-built accounts. If I don't want to use Oracle's accounts, I don't have to. So I can say I want to plan revenue and expense, but I'm just going to build my own stuff. You can do that and simply just don't check any of these boxes. Those items are not going to be created. I recommend going ahead and checking at least one of the revenue and one of the expense items. Even if you're not going to use it, you could choose not to use it. But what's great is once you've built those accounts, it gives you kind of a template for what the member formulas, what the logic looks like of what you should build. So I recommend picking one of them. Even if you don't use it, it's got an example there that you can take advantage of so that you can build your own logic if you want to. You can also enable income statements, so it'll build an income statement for you. And just depending on your view, if you're for-profit company or nonprofit company. And then if you want to build a simple income statement, it'll actually build it for you. Typically, we're checking the box that says earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation and amortization. So you can do that and leverage the out of the box. Now, you can always build in your own net income structure as well, but this allows you to take advantage of some of the pre-built options, which I recommend, and then you can kind of adjust and enhance it from there. The financials framework also supports integrated balance sheet and cash flow planning. So if you want to incorporate balance sheet planning into your application, you can check the balance sheet box. And then again, you can choose to use your own account, or again, you can use the pre-built accounts. There is support for driver-based balance sheet. So it depends on the cash flow method that you pick. So cash flow is supported as well. And so from a cash flow standpoint, you've enabled balance sheet and you've enabled cash flow. There's a direct method approach, which uses your sources of cash and uses of cash to calculate a direct cash flow. Or you can choose the indirect method, which is probably the most common, where you're going to be forecasting your day sales outstanding, your DSO or your DPO. That's going to then look at your revenue and expense and then calculate kind of the adjustments for your accounts receivable and your accounts payable. So the integrated kind of balance sheet and cash flow pieces are built in. And again, it's all options that you can check as part of the financials framework. There's also support for rolling forecast, weekly planning. There's support for 13 periods. So a lot of different options that you can configure within financials. You can add in custom dimensions into the financials framework. So likely you're going to want to have something beyond your entity dimension and your account dimension. Again, if you checked that box for products or services, those are going to automatically be checked for you. But this is where you'll go down to the section, and this is where you can choose to add custom dimensions. So this is where you can add your market or your geography dimension. You can add in your line of business. You can add in a department dimension. So you can add in your custom dimensions. And my recommendation is that, add it if you need it, right? Absolutely, for planning. If it's really something that's more you just need for reporting, then I recommend you add that into a reporting cube that you can do within the same application, but don't necessarily add it here. You want to keep as few dimensions as possible, build what you need, but if it's purely a reporting dimension that you need, there's another way to do it without adding it here within the financials framework. So once you've gone through the enablement process, at that point, a list of steps are going to show up underneath the configure menu. And you just will kind of run through those configure steps. So the first one is the planning and forecast preparation. This is where you're going to set, okay, this is my current year, this is my current period, but this is where you can also set, for plan, we do a 2-year plan, but for forecast, we may do like maybe a 18-month forecast, or we may do, maybe it's a 5-year forecast or a 3-year forecast. So you're going to be setting how many years, either for plan or budget. Plan and budget is kind of used synonymously in financials framework. And you can change the aliases for these options. And then you can set the periods for forecast. So notice I can set here, I've got plan selected, so then I've got selected 4 years, and then I can choose, I really want to do monthly for the first 2 years, and then the third year I'm going to do quarterly, and then the last period I'm going to do yearly. So the forms are already set up to support kind of this I'm not going to be able to say this periodicity, anyway, the set of periods that we've set and enabled here. And then it's a very dynamic process. So then as we update our periods each month and each year, the forms are going to automatically flow through and update for this particular cycle. The next thing that you're going to do is we're going to configure the accounts and the drivers. So this is where I can configure the revenue accounts, configure the expense accounts, balance sheet. So, and what we mean by configure is basically setting your accounts, importing in those specific accounts that you want to use. So for example, I think I've got an example. Again, and there's a few things kind of behind the scenes. We've got some pre-built numbers. If it's a pre-built number, it's going to be prefixed with OFS _. Those guys are locked down, and you can't really delete them or modify them, but you can change aliases. So oftentimes you're going to use some of those out-of-the-box numbers, but you may change the aliases. Sometimes you're not going to use them, and that's okay too. You can apply security and users don't ever see them. The other thing you can do is add in your own custom accounts, and that's what you're either manually going to add those in through the dimension editor, and or you can import them. So you can import any custom revenue accounts, expense accounts, balance sheet accounts, cash flow. You can kind of incorporate that into the financial structure, and then you can define your own logic and your own member formulas. So again, I remember I mentioned, like, I like checking at least one of those driver options, even if I'm not going to use it, because it gives me a template that I can use for my logic. So for example, I feel like I have a screenshot somewhere. You know, we may create accounts, members, cost per member, claims, or cost per claim. I mean, we may have different types of costs. And then we can add in formulas that then calculate, you know, kind of what those cost per members are, what the cost per member cost per claim is based on actuals. And then we can also add in a member formula that then actually on the forecast side, if it's forecast, we want it to be members times our cost per member to get to our membership cost. So those are just some examples of things that you will build into the system and import those in. After you've built your accounts dimension, you're moving on to the entity dimension and the rest of your custom dimensions. Financials modules looking for a parent-child format. If you're using EDM, Enterprise Data Management, which is kind of the cloud solution for dimensions and hierarchy and data governance, we can connect and import dimensions in from EDM. And or it can be just, you know, a simple file that's got those hierarchies. So you'll import those into the application. And you're pretty much done at that point from a dimensionality standpoint. I did want to review a plan element dimension that it comes with the financials module. This dimension is pretty awesome in terms of giving you visibility into the data. So you will, whenever we integrate data, we load it to the OFS load member. Whenever users input data, they're going to input it into a direct input member. OFS calculated is just what it says. That's where we're going to have all of our calculated values. And then if we're adjusting a calculated value, we're going to put that in the adjustment number. So it provides a level of visibility into where's the different data coming from. So if you see something, you can drill into the plan element dimension and you can understand, oh, this was an input from a user, or oh, I calculated this value. There's also, if we have implemented some of the other modules like CapEx or Workforce, if we're using those modules, there are integration numbers. So we can see if what data is coming from some other cubes within the application itself. The next step is you're going to be setting some user variables. This is a one-time step, really. So you're going to, as a user, I'm going to pick my entity. I'm going to pick my scenario, my version. What do I want to use as a starting point? So it's just kind of a one-time step. And then after that, users can dynamically change these variables through the forms themselves. At that point, as an administrator, likely you're going to go in and your users can set trends. But what I would say from like a kind of a common practice is that as an administrator, as part of the project, we kind of set maybe some global trends that we apply. So we go in and we can set trends. We can set it at a global level and then copy those out to different entities, or we can allow users to set trends as well. But what we want to do kind of the first time out is set some trends so that when we run the out-of-the-box calculations, it's going to go ahead and calculate and see the forecast or budget that we're using. So we can set revenue trends, expense trends, and then our balance sheet trends and assumptions. So we'll go in and say, okay, so how do we want to, calculate forecast for like our different drivers, our members, our membership, and our different costs. And then if there's accounts that are trend-based, how do we want to calculate those? So we can go ahead and assign those trends. So then once we've set it, when we run calculations, it's going to go ahead and use those trends in the forecast calculation. The next step is we want to load data. So really, for the most part with financials, you're loading in your actual data. So your actuals, drivers data, and then like your actuals. So you may go back 2 years, potentially using that from a forecast standpoint. You may just load 1 year. And again, once you get, usually what happens is forecast is at least loaded monthly. Sometimes it's loaded nightly. If you load your actuals, you're going to load your actuals process, and then there's a prepare forecast step that will then calculate. Well, I'll go jump to our next I'll jump to the calculation in a little bit, but then we calculate the data. So you're going to load in the data. There are some templates available to you. There's a couple different ways to load data. You can load it through kind of a simplified user interface. Likely you're going to set up integrations using data management, which comes with the cloud, so that runs on a scheduled basis. It's a hands-free process and automatically, loads data from your various different sources into the application on an automatic basis. Kind of in this screenshot, I just wanted to make sure you knew, like with data management, we can connect to a lot of different systems. So really any system, and you're going to have a number of different ones, and those things can be automated. We do have direct connects with EBS, with Fusion Cloud, so Oracle products for sure, but if you've got other systems, there are ways, again, either from a file-based standpoint or using a new tool within data management called the APM integration agent to connect into your various different sources. So really easy to set up these integration processes so that those run. On a scheduled basis, you can also click the play button. This is kind of just a fun thing when you're ready to run something and it's been set up. You can also just click the play button to go ahead and run and execute a data integration. One other thing to note with data management, you do have drill through capability or drill back. So you can drill back to see transaction level details or whatever volume of detail that was loaded into the application, you can drill back to that. And then there is support actually to drill directly back into EBS or the Fusion Cloud from APM. So if you're wanting to understand where did an actual cost come from, you have the ability to kind of go back and see that information and jump into the system. Okay, so we've created our application, enabled and configured. We've built our dimensions, we've loaded data. Now we have to calculate. So there are pre-built rules and financials that you will run. You're gonna run calculate actuals first after you load your actuals data. Then when you're ready and you've set those trends, you run the prepare forecast. And what that does is it makes an archived version of the forecast. It's gonna update actuals into the forecast version, so that way you have the latest set of information. The rule then runs those trend calculations that we talked about. It's going to calculate those driver-based formulas that you may have created, and then do an aggregation of the cube. And then you're ready, almost ready for your users to plan. There is another rule that will roll up the cube, so if you just need to re-aggregate the cube, you can do that. And then there's a separate rule to calculate the cash flow. So depending on if you're using the direct or indirect approach, it's going to calculate the resulting cash flow based on the forecast information that's there. The plan process is very similar to this. Usually forecast, that's kind of the main process that we're doing. And again, we've seen customers go from quarterly forecast to monthly forecast because it was very easy to kind of update actuals, rerun. All users had to do was kind of review and adjust and tweak. So, and then again, in the case of COVID, we may be doing this on a daily and or weekly basis, kind of updating information as it comes in because things are changing so fast. The last step is assigning security to all of your different users so they can get into the system. If you come from the on-prem world and Hyperion planning, it works very similarly. So we're going to provision users to have certain roles, and then we can assign application access. So I now have a few additional details. I want to make sure, I think we're tracking okay on time. But I wanted to save you a few minutes for strategic modeling. Last step, enabling the application for all users, and then they're ready to go, right? So we've loaded in, we've set some trends, and then users can ready to plan their information and go and use. So before we conclude, I did want to show you the financials model and the strategic modeling portion of this. So strategic modeling, Shankar talked about earlier about the different ways that you can do kind of an aggregate level scenario modeling. So what I showed you guys absolutely is your, with the financials module, you can do scenario modeling there, of course. That is usually where, though, you're pushing it out to a larger number of users across your organization, doing your kind of detailed forecast. But you can use it to do an aggregate level model. Now, there's another option within kind of the financials module framework, part of the planning cloud, that's called strategic modeling. And this is what Shankar talked about a little bit earlier. This one is where you take it a little bit step up. It's usually like a core set of users or smaller set of users. You're not reaching out to all of your different departments and collecting a mass amount from 200, 500 users, this is maybe a team of 10 that is really working on some different scenarios in an aggregate level. So just kind of illustrating, giving you a few screenshots to what some of the use cases and stories that he talked about in the session earlier today. So you can create a new model. So again, within the planning cloud, within the financials framework, and it's kind of part of the financials piece, but you essentially can create new models from strategic modeling. So you'll select strategic modeling, assuming you have access, and at that point you can create a new model. Within the model, you can set kind of what's the default currency, so you can do a little bit of kind of basic currency translation, and you can set your units. So here's where typically you're setting this in the millions, because you're setting this at a kind of a higher aggregate level for your organization. You can create models from templates. So there are templates for the financials industry, healthcare industry, higher ed, retail, and utility industry. There is also a standard template. So I recommend doing that because then it has some pre-built accounts and pre-built reports that you can take advantage of. The other thing that you can do is you could create your own template. So once you've kind of created a series of counts and some models that you want to just use over and over again, you can save those as templates and then use them going forward, which is really helpful. So I create the model, I click next, and from there, I'm going to define the calendar. So I don't have all of the individual steps, but here you can define, okay, what are the start and end periods and years, how many historical years are going to be part of the module, and then what level of granularity. So are we doing this at a monthly level, a quarterly level, or at a yearly level? And again, those time periods can vary across years. So once you select kind of how you're creating a model, if you're using one of the templates, or you could just create an empty one. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it's good. And you do a create model, the model is going to be created. So within strategic modeling, what's great about it, it's got this pre-built financial intelligence. So it's got an integrated, very similarly to financials module, an integrated income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. This is integrated even more so because you really don't have to do any further configuration here if you didn't want to. Like if you just wanted to plan, your sales revenue, your expenses, and kind of use the out-of-the-box accounts that comes with it, you can do that, and there's really no further steps required. Now, in real life, what you are likely going to do is add in some of your own accounts. Now, whereas in financials module, we may go down to a pretty low level of GL accounts. In strategic modeling, we don't always do that. We may take it up a few steps, but this is where you can either use the out-of-the-box accounts, we can rename or change these descriptions for these existing ones, and then we can add in new accounts, new levels of detail, and new logic. So in Payor example, we may add in like our members, our cost per member, average cost per member for some of our higher level costs, so that we can do some scenario modeling based on some of those drivers. And again, the form, I can access this both in the web and in Excel. And I can see kind of account view. I can look at all accounts. I can filter based on income statement. I can filter based on balance sheet. And you can also create your own kind of custom groups of accounts and navigation. Users can then forecast. You can assign, I don't think I have a screenshot of this, but you can assign different forecast methods. So you can pick, I want to forecast as a growth rate. Notice you see I can forecast something as a % of sales. You get to pick, you can forecast as a % of another account, and then you actually change that account. You can do direct input if you want to, and or you can create your own logic, where, in the case here, we may have kind of our premiums, and that's going to be our membership times our premium rates to get to a number. So a lot of different flexibility you can do within the strategic modeling from an account perspective. You can also create, this is where, again, that kind of core group of users that's working with these different models and scenarios can create different models very easily. So this is where they can create delayed recovery. I can create prolonged contraction and create those different models. I can choose the accounts that we want to include as part of that model. You can have it be tied to or inherit from the base model, or you can have it be a standalone model. So a lot of options there. As users go through and, make changes, so if we're changing the percentage of sales here in this example that I've highlighted, any changes you make, you're going to see highlighted in yellow. You click save and calculate, and then it's actually going to run those calculations. So this is just wanted to give you a glimpse of strategic modeling. This is not all of the features and functions that are available to you. Shankar mentioned Goal Seek, which is a really powerful feature. So if you kind of know, all right, this is where we need to be, to keep our cash flow positive. What needs to happen? Like, how do I need to adjust maybe my expenses? And you can have it calculate that for you, so then you can see, okay, this is going to require, if my end result, this is going to keep us fluid. Then, we're going to need to reduce, this cost element by 20% or by 25%. So you can use this Goal Seek feature, across your number of different accounts, where you kind of plug in your end result of where you want to be or where you need to be, and then you can see how you can make those adjustments. And then you can very quickly on that slide change it and be like, okay, well, I can't reduce this cost by that much. That won't work. So what's another way to do that? And then you can choose, different accounts to see how you can kind of fluctuate to get to where you need to be. There is different reports that are kind of can be created within the strategic modeling framework. Again, if you choose that standard option, some of those are built for you. Some of them will come just out of the box and you can kind of pick and choose. So there's an income statement, a balance sheet, a direct cash flow, and indirect cash flow. You can also see some statistical type reports. And again, you can kind of compare those against your different models. You can run one for best case, for worst case, and see the results. So with that, I have a few, so I did talk through pretty quickly. We have a few more minutes. So what I'd like to do is open the floor for any questions that we may have. So with the last few minutes that we have available to us, really quickly, want to thank you guys for attending. Don't forget to join the networking session. So this is going to be right after the session. You should see an email. So we'll get to do some networking, talking, and somebody gets to win a set of wireless Bluetooth headphones. So that'll be exciting. So what questions can I answer for you guys today? I know I kind of covered a lot very quickly. I wanted to make sure I got through everything. Well, what questions can I answer for you guys?